The Masters Tournament is one of the biggest DFS profit opportunities of the entire PGA DFS season. Not only is it the best golf tournament of the year, it's a huge opportunity for sharp PGA DFS players to cash in, thanks to an influx of casual competitors and the staggering prize pools offered by DraftKings and FanDuel. But what makes the Masters a not-to-be-missed profit opportunity, and how can you navigate this competitive landscape to win big this year? My name is Jordan Shand, and I'm the head coach here at SaberSim, where I've been helping DFS players win more money playing daily fantasy golf for years. Stay tuned as I reveal my top 4 strategies that could turn this tournament into your biggest payday yet, uncovering secrets that the casual player knows nothing about. Key number 1 is to use simulations that understand the full range of outcomes of golfers. Projecting golf is a challenging puzzle that requires combining golfer skill, short-term and long-term form, course fit, course history, Vegas odds, and more. And while SaberSim and many other models do a good job of incorporating these factors into average projections, simulations let you go beyond the average projections to understand the full range of outcomes of golfers and implement that data into your lineups. In golf, having a picture of the full range of outcomes is primarily important due to the cut. Even the top favorites are live to miss a cut. Even at the Masters, just ask Rory from last year, and average projections alone don't do a good job of communicating what these distributions actually look like. Let's take a look at a golfer distribution to show you what I mean. Golfers have a binary distribution where there is a set of outcomes where the golfer makes the cut and where they miss the cut. But the average projection alone doesn't communicate this nuance, and the average projection isn't even the most common outcome. Most of your opponents in your contests will be eyeballing their lineups, building by hand, or using average projections and traditional optimizers that fail to grasp the nuance of these distributions. On SaberSim, the most important thing to factor this in is to make sure you're building on sim mode with a high sim diversity setting. This will incorporate our hole-by-hole simulations of the tournament directly into your lineups. When building this way, each lineup is the optimal lineup for a given way the tournament can play out, and will build you a pool of as many as 5,000 lineups to sort through and rank to find your favorites. And while there are ways to secure additional value in our simulations with your research, which I'll dive into in a second, I first want to talk about my second key. Key number 2 is to prioritize ownership. Ownership is always an important factor in PGA DFS. When you're building lineups with just 6 golfers and playing large field GPPs, getting to some low-owned plays and correctly picking the right chalk to fade is key to getting a big relative advantage over the field. But it's absolutely crucial for the Masters because the contests are even bigger and the field of golfers we have to choose from is smaller, not to mention a bunch of golfers that take up spots in the field that really have no shot at winning and that you probably would never want to play in your lineups. Yet at the same time, your opponents are not randomly clicking players. People generally know who the good plays are, and you're often going to have to eat some ownership to play lineups with golfers that are live to win. So how do we balance these factors? By comparing ownership versus upside at the individual player and at the lineup level. SaberSim makes this easy with 2 powerful features. First, adjusted ownership. Ownership projections are a simple statement about what percentage of lineups in a contest will have a given player, but it doesn't tell you anything about whether that player is a good or a bad play at that ownership. Adjusted ownership is a custom SaberSim algorithm that compares how that player is performing in our simulations to their ownership projection to calculate what their actual effective ownership is. Let me explain. 2 players might have an ownership projection of 20%, but if one player's adjusted ownership is 28% and the other is 13%, it means that the first player's ownership counts as more because they're underperforming that ownership projection in our simulations. And the second player's ownership actually counts as 13% because they're overperforming that expected ownership in our simulations. You can see our adjusted ownership projections for each golfer in the field in the SaberSim app, and it's a great way to get a sense of the good versus the bad chalk for the Masters. But it's also automatically accounted for in the grading of your lineups via SaberScore, negatively weighing adjusted ownership relative to the projection and the upside of the lineup. But we can go one step further with ownership by leveraging SaberSim's contest simulations. Ultimately, we play lineups into these contests, not individual golfers, so it's better to judge upside versus ownership at the lineup level. Contest simulations do exactly that, by taking each lineup in your pool, built using our tournament simulations, and entering them in a simulated version of the contest you're planning on playing. Taking into account the expected field lineups and the payout structure, we can go straight to the source of calculating the expected ROI of your different lineups. Contest simulations account for ownership because your golfers performing well in a simulation is relative to how many lineups in the field are likely to have that golfer, and the upside of the lineups by using the tournament simulations to play this hypothetical contest out over and over again. Using these two factors, we can see what lineups have the highest expected ROI in your contests. But let's come back to the projections themselves for my key number 3, which is research course history. Per DataGolf's course history tool, which is linked in the description of this video, Augusta National is the most important course history course on the PGA Tour, meaning past performance at the Masters is more important for projecting future performance than any other event. And while course history is factored into our simulations and most projection models, it can be a useful insight to use for additional research, especially when combined with ownership. I use course history research as a tool to help me find the lower owned plays that the field might be overlooking, or the chalkier plays that I want to fade. And let me show you how it all works. First, we want to make sure that Augusta National is set as the course on the tool and set the minimum rounds played to 8 or even 12 rounds to make sure we have a large enough sample size to work with. Then I like to look at the shots gained versus expectation, which normalizes the impact of the course for the golfer skill level to give you a sense of what golfers are most over and underperforming their expectations at Augusta. Now, we don't want to necessarily just jam all the golfers that are overperforming and fade all the golfers that are underperforming, but I like to combine this with the ownership projections to find some pivots from what the field is going to be doing. A golfer with a high ownership projection that frequently underperforms at Augusta might be a golfer I want to lower my exposure to or slightly reduce their projection, and vice versa for a golfer with a low ownership projection that frequently overperforms at the Masters. Where this tends to be particularly valuable is in situations where some other factor is leading to a golfer being projected to be particularly high or low owned. Maybe it's a golfer that's been playing well or poorly recently, or just a guy that's under or overpriced on DraftKings or FanDuel relative to their projections. If the field is overlooking what I believe to be the most important factor for Masters Week, I want to exploit that. And it doesn't take a huge adjustment to your process to take advantage of this. When I see an exploitable course history versus ownership spot, just increasing or decreasing my exposure by 10% or bumping a golfer's projection up or down by 5 to 10% is often enough to take advantage. Yet, at the end of the day, we're only going to get to play the Masters for DFS once, so how can we find additional ways to realize our profit during this tournament? Which brings me to key number 4, which is play the showdowns. The only bad thing about PGA DFS for the Masters is that it only comes once a year, but we can give ourselves more opportunities to win big by playing the showdown contests for the round each day. The main tournaments are a lot of fun, but the showdowns give us more shots on goal. And for the Masters, they come along with some pretty serious prize pools themselves. Plus, PGA DFS Showdown is a huge opportunity for a unique edge of its own. The SaberSim simulations update each day based on how the golfers have played the course so far, but in my experience, one of the biggest edges in PGA Showdown is the field way overvaluing how golfers have played in the tournament so far. You'll regularly see bad golfers that had a good round 1 being much higher owned in round 2, and top golfers that had a poor round 1 coming in at massive ownership discounts. In my experience, you often don't even have to do anything at all to get these huge leverage opportunities in your lineups. The SaberSim simulations, contest sims, and SaberScore will find them for you, but you can often dig a little deeper by comparing your pool exposure in SaberSim to a golfer's current score. Because lineups built on SaberSim in sim mode with high sim diversity are the optimal lineup for a given set of simulations of the round, the pool exposure, the percentage of lineups in your entire pool that contain a particular golfer, function as a percent of the time that golfer is in the optimal lineup for that round. so we can use it as a tool to gauge how good a player is on a given showdown. When comparing pool exposure against their current score or their leaderboard position, along with the ownership projection for that upcoming round, we can find players that aren't showing up in the winning lineup often, but had a good round one and are likely to be heavily owned, as well as players that are showing up in the winning lineup often that might have had a poor round one. By once again making adjustments to our exposure or projections to those golfers, we can play off that ownership leverage that we'll get from the field overvaluing what we know about the current tournament. And this is even a bigger opportunity during the Masters, again because course history is so important here. In the event that Jordan Spieth has a poor round one, the field is likely to heavily overvalue that single round when building lineups for round two, throwing out a rich history of him playing well on this course in the tournament where course history is the most important factor. Regardless, getting additional action down in the showdowns over the course of the Masters tournament is a great way to double, triple, or quadruple dip into the huge prize pools and soft competition that the Masters provides. Now, we've covered a lot here, so let's summarize the top 4 keys to get you ready for the Masters. First, take advantage of simulations that understand the full range of outcomes of golfers. Your opponents building with average projections will likely understate both the downside and the upside of golfers as they're building their lineups. You can exploit this with a simulation. Second, prioritize ownership even more than normal. You'll likely be playing huge contests with a limited viable player pool. Separating the good chalk from the bad chalk is particularly important at the Masters. Third, research course history. Augusta is the biggest course history course on tour, and we can especially find opportunities to take advantage of this when factoring in players whose ownership projections do not match up with their experience playing at Augusta. And finally, play the showdowns. We only get one chance to play PGA DFS at the Masters every year, but we can reduce our variance and get ourselves more opportunities at a big payday by diving into the showdown contests each day. Now, if you're watching this video and you're stepping back into the DFS arena for the first time since the Super Bowl, then welcome back. While there's nothing like sweating PGA DFS on Sunday of the Masters, my most profitable DFS sport is going on right now with big slates every single day. And I just released a strategy guide walking you through everything you need to know to get started. Yep, I'm talking about MLB. Check out my guide on how to beat MLB DFS in 2024 next to learn how you can also make this a super profitable sport for you. And make sure to hit subscribe to get notified every time I drop a new DFS strategy guide. I'll see you in the next one.